All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. As always, I am your host, Redbeard, and you know how it is here. We always put liberty first, and we do not compromise on our principles here. Those are very, very important things. This is a very impromptu, kind of just random episode that I decided to do. There's a lot of things that kind of came up overnight, going into this morning. So there's going to be a few things that I would like to try and talk about here real quick. It's going to be, I don't know, a little bit more casual, perhaps a little bit more laid back, but I'm going to try and get all of the updates, the news to the best of my ability so far that I know out to you guys and gals, give you some of my takes, my opinions, and hopefully get you set up for this next week. Obviously, as you can see, the title, it's the Iran war development, kind of what's going on there, but also there's some changes that are occurring in Europe now. And you'll kind of understand why that's important as well. And there's several articles that I really just was not able to get to yesterday as much as I would have liked. But there's one in particular that I think is going to pique your guys and gals' interest as well. So stick around, hit that, that like, the subscribe, maybe even, if you like what you see, possibly slap down a share. Everything absolutely helps. And I always greatly appreciate that support. So without further ado, let's kind of get into it here. So, for those of you that were paying attention yesterday, it kind of came out, I don't know, pretty late at night. This is an article obviously written by Dave DeCamp today, or that was put out today, but it was referring to essentially what happened last night, which is the fact that there was no agreement, there was no deal, there was really no real compromise whatsoever. But instead, what we got out of that is JD Vance going all the way back to Washington um, with nothing really decent to report to President Trump in terms of progress, despite what the White House might tell you and saying that it's going to be so close. There's a potential deal there and yada, yada, yada as to, it's, always perpetually Iran's fault. They're still hung up on the whole nuclear thing. It's quite ridiculous. But let's dive in here and see what Dave DeCamp had to write here pertaining to this. So Dave DeCamp starts out. President Trump declared on Sunday that he was ordering U.S. Navy to impose a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz after U.S. and Iranian officials held about 20 hours. I think it was somewhere around 21 hours, if I'm not mistaken, but it's about 20 hours of talks in Pakistan that didn't result in a deal. Trump said that the U.S. And Iran didn't reach an agreement. Sorry, I have a itchy nose. Didn't reach an agreement on the nuclear issue, suggesting that Washington is still demanding Tehran commit to zero nuclear enrichment. Another major sticking point is the fact that Israel has refused to enact a ceasefire in Lebanon and has continued major airstrikes into the country that have massacred hundreds of civilians since the U.S.-Iran truce started. I'm very hesitant to even call it a truce. I think it's one of those things that it's just kind of one of those very tenuous, unspoken, like, all right, we'll see what this gets us. A truce, a ceasefire. I don't really know which word is going to work best. I think it's sheer luck, to be honest. And so we have a statement that, a partial statement, rather, if we look at what Trump had to say, right? And he essentially says, so there you have it. The meeting went well. Most points were agreed to, but the only point that really mattered, nuclear, was not. Effective immediately, the United States Navy, the finest in the world, will begin the process of blockading any and all ships trying to enter or leave the Strait of Hormuz. And then he continues on and goes on to, at some point, we will reach an all being allowed to go in, all being allowed to go out basis, but Iran is not allowed that to happen by merely saying there may be a mine out there somewhere that nobody knows about. so on and so forth. He goes on to say it's extortion and yada yada yada. Leaders of countries. The reality of it is, and we've been saying this, not just myself, but many other people have been saying this. I don't know if he's just deaf, dumb, blind, retarded, inept, getting terrible information, whatever the case is. But the reality of it is the only people that that Hormuz has been closed to are people that are not making a deal or paying some type of a pass or toll fee to Iran for ships have been going in and out of there, just not ours. So this whole idea that ships aren't moving or whatever the case is, or that it's world extortion. It's not world extortion per se. It's this idea that you're not getting to play because one, you started a freaking war with Iran, and now they're saying, look, if you're not going to play by our rules, right now we run the strait, and if you're not going to pay us to pass, and you're not going to be amicable, and you're not going to work with us, then you don't have to worry about coming through here. Whether you guys think that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's essentially what the situation is. And so it's just this perpetual regurgitation of the same stupid lines that we've been hearing for the last number of weeks. And I suspect we're going to continue seeing the same things from Trump. It's almost as if, he's really working from the position of, if I just say it enough times, everybody's going to believe me after a certain amount of times. The narrative shifts are the same. The whole thing of like, we've eliminated practically everything and anything that can possibly do anything in Iran. That's been the same thing, even though that's objectively false, or it's false in the entire sense. It doesn't really matter how many times that you say it when reality itself says something else, right? So it's insane to me that we still have this type of situation where he continues to just press the same stupid buttons. And it goes on to say, essentially, Trump also said that he ordered the Navy to seek and interdict every vessel in international waters that has paid a toll to Iran. He issued a warning to the Iranian military, saying that any Iranian who fires at us or at peaceful vessels will be blown to hell. Again, so now we're just going to interdict vessels that have clearly paid a toll or a fee to use the waters, right? So that's what we're coming down to. Some people have already described it as like, oh, great, now we're just going back to the same piracy game, to where we have, for whatever reason, the ability just to go and stop any vessel we don't like, when the agreement doesn't involve us. It involves that vessel, that the country of origin for that vessel, and the agreement that they have with Iran. Why are we, it's this stupid thing to where they, he just said, right, wrong, or indifferent, like, oh, nobody's able to move through, there's no this, that, and the other thing. And now it's just like, no, you know what? Now we're going to be the ones essentially causing the problem. We're going to blockade it. We're going to stop vessels. We're going to conduct interdiction missions. And so it's the most ridiculous situation that we have that's just taking place right now. I mean, it's like he's trying to pivot this whole thing as if Iran is overwhelmingly the consistent bad guy here, all while ignoring the fact that we started this whole thing to begin with. And now we're going to take the position of interdicting ships, and that we have it. Nothing is our fault. We are of no fault. We have no responsibility whatsoever, except for the responsibility that we have to take. And apparently, like seizing, things like the nuclear material and this, that, and the other thing. This is coming from a guy in an administration that one day says that it's about nuclear material, another day it's about the missiles, another day it's about regime change. Then they deny every single thing. And for whatever reason, it's all of a sudden not any of those things one day, but then it becomes about one of those things another day. It's absolutely insane and all over the map. And the other thing too is, I think it's interesting how in part of the statement, I'm sorry, he happens to mention that no one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. That's part of his statement. No one who pays an illegal toll will have safe passage on the high seas. So I failed to wrap my head around this because, okay, if it's illegal, then it's helping it. Well, it's not really helping your case, but you're shaping it in the way of just like, oh, like you shouldn't have had to pay this, but now you're not going to be safe because somehow, you paying this, quote unquote extortion, as he likes to call it. Now it's just like, oh, well, we are going to essentially just chain you down and, have our way with you. And there's nothing you can really do about it. It's one of just the most ridiculous things that I think we've seen yet. And that's really being kind of nice about the whole situation. So needless to say that the talks didn't go well. We're having conversations about blockading, and it's not just blockading, but it's stopping and potentially seizing and saying that if you have a deal with Iran, you're not going to be safe on the high seas. They basically expect to be a target if you're doing all the things that you made a deal to be able to do with. You paid the money, you have the freedom of navigation to do that by way of your agreement. But now you're a terrible person and we're going to stop you, and you're not going to be safe in the high seas. So it's very, very bizarre. The whole situation. I don't see this necessarily getting better. I think you're just going to see things continuously degrade over time, and we'll have to kind of see where it goes. But I do think it's very interesting how we're still seeing this talking point of everything's been degraded. Iran has no capabilities. They have no missiles, they have no air, they have nothing. Again, as I mentioned last night with Rebecca Whiting on, they keep saying this, but yet we continue to lose personnel, we continue to lose material, vehicles, all of these different things, vehicles being like aircraft predominantly. And then, the Pentagon got caught lying about the damages and the effect that occurred on one of the bases in Kuwait there. And so it really does make the mind wonder, okay, if you're going to put this blockade into place, how are you going to do that? You're not getting your ships at this juncture very close. And I know that there was a couple headlines running around yesterday suggesting that there were U.S. naval vessels that allegedly were in or at least close to within proximity of Hormuz. I've heard also information being reported that those vessels had essentially been told, like, you need to leave or you're going to be struck, and that those U.S. naval vessels ended up turning around and leaving essentially like the entry or at least the proximity of Hormuz. So if you're going to initiate a blockade, how are you going to do that? What is your plan to do that? And then how are you going to, what is your plan to essentially thwart any type of attack on your vessels, as it were? And I don't want to hear the whole thing from the administration as, well, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the capability. That's already been proven false, right? So clearly they have the capacity and the capability. So are you willing to sacrifice men, women, and your ships to guarantee the blockade of Hormuz? And then on top of that, are you capable of actually doing some of the things that you say you're going to do, like stopping every ship that goes through Hormuz? Are you going to are you going to be able to enforce that in a way that makes sense? And on top of that, you already have assets coming in addition from China in terms of AD and stuff like that. And regardless of what you think about Chinese AD, you have those assets that are coming in militarily. There's a lot of things that are going on. And I think that when you look at it in the broader perspective here, just like it has been to begin with, there's really no constructive plan moving forward. They just say these things and they're like, oh, we're going to do this. but then it's like, where's the logistics? How are you going to not get hit? And is it just going to be the same constant line of dialogue that you continue saying after one of our ships gets struck, people die, people get injured? Are you going to say that they have no ability to do anything at all? I'll be really interested to see how this all pans out. If it happens, you never know. I mean, this is with this administration with Trump, he has a tendency to say a lot of things, and half the time he doesn't do some of these things, which sometimes is also a good thing. But other times it just makes it more confusing because you have to wonder what is that going to lead to next, you know? So the whole situation with the conversation, you know, the talks, now we have the blockading, we have resources that are going to be flowing more into Iran. We have all of this tension that's now essentially reigniting, and it makes one wonder, you know, are they going to shift back to this situation to where that you know, potentially introducing ground forces might be a thing too, right? So there's a lot here that we need to take some time and essentially kind of sort all this out and see what's going to happen, because right now there's a 50-50 chance that they're going to do a blockade. If they do a blockade, you know, what is that going to look like? And I think it's going to, I think if we do a blockade, I think essentially it's going to result in, unfortunately, casualties. I think we're potentially going to have, at least in the very least, damaged ships. And I think it's going to be one of those things to where they're going to chalk it up to oversight and try and run that same dialogue where they say, well, you know, we didn't foresee this coming, or we couldn't have accounted for this. You know, some of the same things that they have said before, which is, oh, we didn't know that this was going to happen. And then a week later, they're going to be like, oh, well, we knew all about this. So it's like, which one is it? Did you not know? Did you know? What's the case? So we'll have to see about that. Taking a little bit of a shift here away from Iran. I don't know if any of you have been paying attention to some of the things that have occurred in Europe. One of the most significant is the fact that Viktor Orban over in Hungary, he's the prime minister of Hungary, conceded his election race. Now, for those of you that aren't super familiar with Viktor Orban, he's been a fairly vocal proponent of not sending resources, material, any form of financial aid to Ukraine during the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And on top of that, he has also been more of a fairly heavy proponent on maintaining the sovereignty of Hungary and not necessarily bending to the whims and the will of the EU and NATO. Viktor Orban, I believe, had been in office for over 15 years. He's been there for a while. He's seen a lot of different things, and he had become one of the more dependable voices in terms of maintaining his country's stability and his country's sovereignty. You also have Peter Szarto. I think that's the way that you pronounce his name. He is also another person that's very much along the lines with Orban. And now that you have Orban that's going to be outgoing, and you have this guy from the other party, it becomes one of those things to where, what is that going to look like? How is this going to affect things moving ahead, for not only just for Hungary itself, but also the relations that we have? How is that going to affect the situation potentially with fuel? Is it, are they going to be able to get fuel? Are we going to try to make deals with them to give them fuel? There's a lot of questions here with Orban going out. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. And, hopefully there is a maintained sovereignty status quo that Hungary keeps. But one thing I know that is pretty interesting is you have Ursula von der Leyen, who, look, I'm here to tell you, if you have that person endorsing the result in your country, it's probably not a good thing. But she was overwhelmingly ecstatic, and she said that Hungary has chosen Europe. Well, I don't think Hungary has ever not chosen Europe. They're geographically in Europe. So that's quite the revelation there, Ursula. I don't think that it's necessarily a matter of Hungary choosing Europe as it is more of an issue of Hungary choosing whether or not it's going to keep more of its sovereignty or less of its sovereignty. The European Union and NATO have done a great job of not so much doing that. What you have is a very high class of or a high tier level of politicians that tend to try and drive all of the member states into doing one thing or the other. You have dissenting opinions for a long time, especially as it concerns the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where you had Hungary that really didn't want to be involved. You had Slovakia that started coming around, and you had other countries that were not so much wanting to be involved into those different things. And every time that they have, who was always around the corner that was trying to shame these countries for wanting to retain their own sovereignty instead of being involved in something? It was people like Ursula von der Leyen, Friedrich Merz, and many others like Mark Rutte. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects, Europe in general, but also Hungarian sovereignty. And in conjunction with that, how it's going to affect the relations that we have moving forward and what that's going to look like essentially for any deals or any trade or whatever the case is. So something that I think is going to be, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops and where that's going to go. In conjunction, just shifting back for a moment over to Hormuz. The other thing that I want to point out is we have this situation to where you have the administration that is saying that, oh, well, we don't need you, and he's speaking to France and Britain and Spain and several other countries. Oh, we don't need you. We can do this on our own. But now, it goes to, or it started as like, we need you all to come and help us. Then we don't need you. And now we need you. And then we don't need you again. So, again, like, which one is it? It's a very inconsistent thing. And it's almost like you're seeing this situation to where they want both things. They want people to go and help and open up the strait. But then when people are just like, yeah, no, this isn't really our problem, we don't need to be involved into your stupid war, then it's like Trump or people within the administration throw a fit and be like, fine, we don't need you. So which one is it? Again, it becomes one of those things to where, do we have a very capable military? Yes, we do. I think what people fail to understand is the fact that there are logistical things there that also make it very, very difficult. And it's not just an easy task. It's not something that is just going to roll over and be complete. We have over 20 years of experience of saying that it's just going to be we'll just do it overnight. It's not going to be a big deal. Iran, everything has been completely degraded. They have no capabilities. They can't do this. They can't do that. And every time that is being said, what ends up happening? We lose aircraft, we lose people, we lose personnel, we lose material. They wiped out 10 very highly sophisticated radar installations in the first week. So it becomes one of these things. At what point do you continue telling yourself that, yeah, this will be a walk in the park? Surely nothing is going to happen. It's so easy. We could do it anytime we want. Well, let's see it then. In the end of the day, let's see it. But then stop asking other people to try and drag them into this issue if you're so confident. It creates a very, very big quandary. And I think the idea that we have an administration and an apparatus that is so arrogant and so confident in the fact that they're capable of doing things, but then actually show, I guess, the lack of will and or potential ability to do it, and considering the fact that we also still keep our ships in standoff distance, could we potentially do it? Sure. Yeah, we could, but there's going to be a great incurred cost. It's not going to be something that's just going to roll over and is going to happen overnight. There will always be a cost. And what that cost looks like, it could be bad. It could be very severe. How much are you willing to lose in order to guarantee that? And not only that, We're not even talking about anything as it pertains to the constitutional ramifications of that. We're not even considering where it lies in there. And if you really want to get into that, let's go to the constitutional realm of it to begin with, which is this whole thing is unconstitutional. It's completely illegal. It absolutely flies in the face of the foundation of our country and all of the delegated potential authority that, or the delegated authority that the president has, and also the abdication of Congress's responsibility to do their freaking jobs. So regardless of how you want to frame it and whether or not we can or we should, it all comes back down to a constitutional situation too, to where nobody should be praising this. And the best solution is to get out of there, stop our people from getting killed, stop wasting resources, and stop trying to run the world. Like I understand that a lot of people are very hot, and bothered about this situation. But the farther down this rabbit hole that you go, in the end of the day, the worse the cost is going to eventually be. I mean, there is a class of individual out there that just assumes that we can do something and there's never going to be any ramifications. There's never going to be any type of consequence. We can do whatever we want, however we want, and it's going to be negligible no matter what. And I think when you see this prevailing form of thought in this administration, when something does happen, it's for whatever reason just a massive shock to these people. I think it's quite insane, to be honest, notwithstanding the constitutional argument. We have no right to sit here and start stopping every freaking vessel that comes through there. I mean, at that juncture, I mean, if you're going to stop every freaking vessel that's going through the Strait of Hormuz and we're going to blockade it and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, well, I mean, I won't get into the overt morality of something like that, but looks really freaking bad, dude. It looks like a lot of people have been saying, which is essentially piracy. Because what are you going to do with the vessel? What's the whole purpose of the stop? What are you going to check their cargo for? What are you stopping? And you even just said that they're not safe on the high seas. So what are you implying there? Are you going to scuttle the vessel? Are you going to sink the vessel? Are you going to blow up the vessel or whatever the case is? Like, are you going to steal the cargo? What is your aim? Again, they don't answer any of these. They just, you just have these ridiculous talking points that ultimately it just evolves itself into just a bigger hole that they continue to dig. And, and that's all while assuming that Iran's not going to try and strike the vessels, the U.S. Navy vessels. So are you going to stop? Are you just going to set up a stoplight in Hormuz and just, check through every single person? All will, potentially getting struck by, like, what are you going to do? Are you going to defend from a potential attack? Or are you going to be more focused on a missile? How do you not get struck by a missile? How do you not get struck by drones? Well, probably not being in a place you don't belong. But then are you going to open up that? Are you going to do your own little form of checks and balances out in the high seas? And then again, if that is what you do and you're not even in Hormuz, then what does that look like? Are you going to scuttle vessels? Are you going to see where they're coming from? Are you going to question where they're going? Are you going to seize their cargo? Under what grounds? What grounds do you have? What are these vessels doing that's illegal, other than paying a country in order to transit through the waters, which is a contractual agreement, right? It's an agreement between a vessel, the country of origin, and Iran. So that is two consenting parties coming to an agreement. Are you going to, is that what you're going to use as the basis or the foundation of what's illegal? I mean, the whole thing's a freaking mess. And there's absolutely no direction whatsoever to any of this. So there's a lot that remains to be seen, where it's absolutely chaos. Now, before we get too far down this, because there's likely to be more things that are going to develop, there is one final thing that I want to cover before I pop off of here for the day. And this one, I think many of you will find fairly interesting. this one is a doozy. So, if you haven't seen, this is from Disclosed TV. Trump promises mass pardons to staff before leaving office. Trump has repeatedly promised mass pardons for his top administration officials before he leaves office. I'll pardon everyone who's come within 200 feet of the Oval, Trump said in a recent meeting, drawing laughs from those present. He has repeated the line, with one advisor recalling him expanding the radius to anyone who came within 10 feet. In a separate conversation last year inside the dining room next to the Oval Office, Trump told advisors he would hold a news conference and announce mass pardons before departing. No specific pardons for specific acts have been detailed. The president raises the issue regularly with White House aides and officials whenever staff expresses fears of future prosecution or congressional investigation. Some aides now believe the offers are serious, noting Trump often jokes about matters he later pursues. This term, Trump already has issued roughly 1,600 pardons and commutations, far more than the fewer than 250 he granted in his first term. Many went to allies, donors, or those connected to them. Aides worried Democrats could seize control of the House in November, launch probes into the Justice Department, DHS, and the pardons themselves. Trump has discussed ways to block such inquiries. The unconditional pardon power is one of the presidency's broadest authorities. Advisors describe a president determined to shield himself and his inner circle from the kind of scrutiny he faced after leaving his first term. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt said the Wall Street Journal should learn to take a joke. However, the president's pardon power is absolute. Former Biden aide Michael LaRosa noted Biden's preemptive pardons for family and officials set a precedent Trump is now exploiting. Pardon attorney Liz Oyer, fired during Trump's second term, warned that the repeated offers could encourage officials to act more aggressively, knowing presidential pardon or protection awaits. Now, what's interesting about this is, what do you need to pardon for? Now, I could think of probably a very, very long list of things that I could see he would want to shield people from. Boy, let's not even get into the realm of the potential lack of investigation or thereof in the covering up, as Joe Kent had pointed out previously, pertaining to Charlie Kirk. Let's talk about the Epstein issues. Let's talk about a lot of these different outlying scandals. A lot of these things that he had talked about that he was going to bring some form of a conclusion to, but it seems like everything just continues to be thrown under the rug, and overwhelmingly, they just don't want any noise or anything like that. But, it really got weird when you eventually had Melania Trump that came out and made her little statement saying, I never knew Jeffrey Epstein. I had nothing to do with him. I was never involved with him or anything like that. And then there's just all kinds of pictures, videos, media of Melania and Trump all over in and around Jeffrey Epstein, as well as many, many people that he's held close for a very, very long time into his inner circle. And so it really makes me wonder, are these pardons going to be due to anything to do with the Epstein situation and scandal? Or is it for something else? Whatever the case is, I do think it's very, very suspect when you start having a president that's already, we're not even finished with the second year, and he's already talking about trying to preemptively pardon a bunch of people in and around his inner circle. I don't know about you, but I mean, that seems very, very suspect to me. It seems par for the course, I mean, if we're being honest. But it seems very, very suspect. Again, with everything that's gone on with Epstein, when you look at all of the different things that have gone on in terms of war, when you look at all of the things that have taken place with a lack of investigation of Russiagate, the Charlie Kirk assassination, when you even look at, the shooters as it pertains to Trump, and you look at so many other things, it really begs the question, how much, what are they, and to what extent are they willing to go to cover up all of these different things and to just wipe it right under the rug. It's very concerning. I mean, there's a clear, distinct pattern of not telling the truth here. Again, Trump ran on being the most transparent administration in U.S. history, and we've heard nothing but absolute lies from this presidency and the administration. So why are you needing to telegraph the idea that you want to preemptively pardon people? Are you saying that these things that these people have done are imprisonable? Do you think, are you implying that these people have done some pretty heinous things that they would otherwise see a lot of time for or worse? I mean, that seems very suspect to me. So yeah, I guess we'll have to see. It's just debacle everywhere, between the Iran war, between the Epstein issues, between a lot of the domestic issues that we're seeing. Also, the Trump administration, as I mentioned yesterday, is also going to be carrying over the Biden's one of the Biden era ATF rulings as it pertains to frames and receivers and the ability of homemade guns, or the making of homemade guns. So really, I mean, the writing's on the wall, man. The writing is just on the wall. And I just don't understand at this juncture what more grace can be given to this administration when they clearly don't care about you. They clearly lie to you every single day. And I think this is just a culmination. I think this is just a culmination environmentally, not just with the Trump administration, but from something that we've seen build up over decades. It's all of the things that have been allowed to happen over the decades, the numerous decades of presidencies, the exceptionism, just kicking the can down the road. We don't have to worry about it. Now we just have this whole thing to where nobody is accountable. Nobody is held responsible. Certainly, nobody's going to be going to prison over anything. Nobody's really going to be held accountable except for very, very, very small, minute cases that get a day of airtime, if even that, and they just get brushed right under the rug. I mean, this is the situation we're living in, and it should terrify you, and it should terrify you and make you upset when you look at this administration and you look at what we're trying to do, not only just abroad, but at the same time, what we're doing here at home. So yeah, I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, I guess just to wrap it up, it's not surprising. There's nothing surprising whatsoever about anything that comes out from the administration at this point. There's nothing surprising about just the ridiculous, insane postings that we see coming from Trump on Truth Social. There's nothing surprising about the bellicosity, the rhetoric. I think everybody and their uncle probably knew that these talks were going to amount to nothing. And so now we're just buckling up for the next wild ride that we're eventually gonna see. And it's unfortunate, I hope no more people have to die over in Iran from our military, but I think this administration's just hell bent on creating whatever issues they can to justify being over there. And I think that they're really going down this realm in solidifying their position in a sunk cost fallacy as it pertains to the war. And furthermore, just a sunk cost fallacy as it pertains to the situation here at home. So I've called this the current state of things and this current situation with our country the sunk cost state, because we're so far down the rabbit hole at this point that I don't think they're ever going to acknowledge any form of truth whatsoever, based off of what we've seen. And I don't really see us reversing course at any juncture. I think it would take a very, very, I think given the patterns, it would take a very, very stark contrast or a very serious issue for anything of worth to occur. So let me know what you guys and gals think in the comments down below. I will try to take some time to go through them, to respond, and do the very best that I can to carry forth that discussion. So thank you, each and every one of you, for taking time out of your busy days and schedules to stop by the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I typically have a regular schedule of Thursdays and Saturdays, though I do feel that as time goes on, we may be looking at a occasional Tuesday here and there. I certainly did a lot more this week than I thought. I think this is the fourth episode. I also will be having, hopefully back on either this week or in the following weeks, Scott Horton to give his perspective, his opinion, and his point of view as it pertains to the Iran situation and foreign policy in general, and also maybe a few other things. So be on the lookout for that. I don't have a hard date set for that yet, but as soon as I figure all that stuff out, I will have something posted on YouTube as soon as I know. I do put a few things on YouTube for updates, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, that's everything I got for you. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your Sunday, and we will see you all next Thursday. Probably let's do 1700. Well, I think I've been staying pretty consistent at 1700 next on Thursday. So 1700 on Thursdays, unless otherwise. But have a great rest of your evening, and we'll see you all on the next one.